Alejandro Mayorkas is in Brownsville, Texas, and will hold a news conference with Border Patrol officials ahead of Title 42's end.
Amount of migrants lining up on the other side of the border. The mayor of El Paso says the emergency declaration will be implemented for at least 30 days and calls on the federal government to provide more shelters for asylum seekers. Well, it was a somber vigil that was held this afternoon for an 8-year-old boy killed in a mass shooting Friday night. Police say Daniel Lasso was one of 5 people killed when a gunman opened fire. Police say all of the victims were shot from the neck up in what they refer to as an almost execution style. Authorities have identified the suspect as 38-year-old Francisco Oropeza. Tonight, he's at the center of a widespread manhunt that involves more than 200 law enforcement officers from multiple agencies. Well, the clock is ticking on America's debt
departments. What I wanted to start there with was, how can the Biden administration both on the one hand say Fauci's the most brilliant medical expert we've ever had, we must listen to him, and at the same time end the COVID mandate across the board, which I agree with, should have ended a long time ago, when Fauci's out there on national TV as recently as like a week or two ago saying there's going to be yet another outbreak.
So if we really want to prevent the next pandemic, and there will be one, there will absolutely be an outbreak of another pandemic. It may be next year, or it may be in your grandchildren, and your great-grandchildren's lifetime. We don't know.
Again, the theme of this show, I'm just going to guess, is going to be, let's find out who the liar is and what we do with him once we find it. We have talked about on this show in the past instances where Fauci has been caught lying, whether it's about the mandates or the vaccines or social distancing or what private companies should do, what government should do, what kids should do at school, and things like that. I just find it ironic that now the Biden administration is like, COVID's over. I want it to be over. It is over. It was over a long time ago when it comes to all these mandates. But it's especially curious that they left some exceptions, though it's not surprising for government work. They seem to always carve out exceptions that most of the time don't have sound logic. And in this instance, I think they've carved out an exception for the NIH, the National Institute of Health, and said, we will let them decide. It's a little weird. If you're saying it's over, it's over. And then on the other hand, they're also saying the Department of Veterans Affairs, which is a massive operation that takes care of our soldiers, both active duty and after service for life. Everyone that's driven around America has seen VA hospitals all over the place. So now we're going to let them decide whether or not COVID mandates are ending when the government has said they're ending. That sets up a whole another legal construction that I find problematic. So now you're saying if you work at the FBI, no mandate. But if you're at NIH or you care for our soldiers at VA and those agencies and departments institute a mandate, then you have to give up your job. But if you just work there.
You don't know, do you?
You can do the math. We need to.
You don't know, do you, Mr. Secretary?
So we're 13% of global.
If you know, why won't you tell me?
If we went to zero, that would be 13%.
You don't know, do you? You just want us to spend $50 trillion, and you don't have the slightest idea whether it's going to reduce world temperatures.
Kennedy also addressed the funding disparity for different types of energy in the DOE budget. The senator pointed out the 38% increase in funding for so-called green energy, only 2% for fossil fuels, and a reduction in funding for nuclear energy by 12%.
This is from your website, okay? Nuclear power is the most reliable energy source, and it's not even close.
Kennedy called for investment in all forms of energy to make all of them cheaper, more available, and cleaner. Senator Bill Hagerty also addressed the lack of Department of Energy funding for nuclear energy.
This administration seems to be more focused on pouring billions of taxpayer dollars into wind and solar when we have a serious situation where China controls a lot of the natural resources and a lot of the supplies there.
Hagerty is calling for more investment in advanced nuclear technologies where he says the U.S. possesses a tech lead and can build a supply chain that doesn't pass through China. Meanwhile, Democrat Senator Joe Manchin is accusing the Biden administration of having a radical climate agenda. He says it is ignoring the domestic energy security part of the Inflation Reduction Act. Manchin says the administration is focusing on the clean energy and environmental parts of the act, while slow-rolling and disregarding the parts that call for investing in fossil fuels to bolster domestic energy security.
I will do everything I can in my power to prevent that from happening.
The senator says that includes voting to repeal his own bill. Senator Joe Manchin was one of the Inflation Reduction Act's sponsors, along with Senator Chuck Schumer. The White House did not immediately return a request for comment on Manchin's allegation that the Biden administration is failing to implement the energy security provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act as written, and on his threat to repeal the legislation. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Deals with companies backed by the Chinese Communist Party? Of course not. But that's what Alyssa Slotkin did.
The ad accuses Congresswoman Alyssa Slotkin of covering up deals with Communist China. The company in question is called Gotion, a subsidiary of Gotion High Tech. It's based in Shenzhen, China's southern metropolis. Last year, Gotion proposed setting up a $2.4 billion electric vehicle battery plant in Grand Rapids, Michigan. A spokesperson confirmed new details to Fox News in April that Slotkin signed a non-disclosure agreement over closed-door discussions about the Gotion project. Those talks, in Slotkin's words, aimed to understand the project's impact and if there were ways to help from the federal level. At the same time, the Gotion plant has been facing intense scrutiny for its direct ties to Beijing. The company's bylaws require it to carry out Communist Party activities in accordance with the Constitution of the Communist Party of China. In a March interview with Tucker Carlson tonight, former candidate for Michigan Governor Tudor Dixon shared her concerns.
It clearly states it has to be the Chinese Communist Party setting up in the middle of the country. You have a lot of opportunity to spy on the United States if you're right in the center of the country, and they're writing clearly stating that they are spying on the United States.
Joseph Sella, former U.S. ambassador to Fiji, noted Slotkin's background as a former CIA analyst and Defense Department official. He told Fox News that Slotkin knew state officials were warned not to sign deals with companies linked to Beijing.
She knows well the grave national security threat the PRC presents to the CCP, and it's unconscionable that she would even begin to think about signing a binding and punitive non-disclosure agreement with the state of Michigan in order to bring a PRC-based and a CCP-tied manufacturer to the heartland of Michigan.
Stella described the agreement with China as subnational incursion.
They're a national security threat, and it's a toe on the door for future espionage operations to happen, as we've seen in the last couple of weeks with the 6 police stations that were found and the 40 police agents of the PRC and the CCP that were arrested in New York.
Slotkin's office declined to comment further on the non-disclosure deal. Meanwhile, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer has pushed for $715 million in incentives for the Gotion proposal. That plan includes $175 million in taxpayer funds, greenlit by a Michigan Senate committee last month, plus a 30-year tax break estimated at $540 million. The funding is part of the Biden administration's efforts to bring electric vehicle production back to America. And Gotion isn't the only beneficiary in Michigan. Ford is also partnering with Chinese battery maker CATL to build another battery factory in the state. That project is on track to get nearly $1 billion under the Inflation Reduction Act, since the plant will be owned by a U.S. company. Altogether, the 2 battery plants will garner close to $2 billion in subsidies from the state of Michigan. Peter Hoekstra, former U.S. ambassador to the Netherlands, sounded a warning about the proposals. He said the U.S. is enriching China's battery industry at the expense of opportunities for American companies and for companies in allied nations.
I think there are lots of people in America. There are lots of people and companies in countries that are allied with us, whether it's in Europe, whether it's Korea or Japan or Australia, that are more than willing to put together proposals to take advantage of that $1 to $2 billion.
President Biden is clearly trying to run out the clock and create a debt crisis. You now have the solution that is good for all of America and Americans. Pass it if you don't have any ideas. If you don't like something in it, if you have ideas of your own, our speaker is more than willing, I'm sure, to listen to those.
The proposed budget cuts in the legislation include several of the president's top priorities, including his student loan forgiveness plan, green energy tax credits, and new funding for the IRS. Democrats say the House GOP's bill is not a serious proposal.
The Republicans are demanding hostage
such negotiations, where they will crash the full faith and credit of the United States. It would throw our country into recession and hurt us globally.
Senator Bernie Sanders says there are other ways to rein in spending.
I think we can move toward cutting military spending. We're now spending 10 times more than than any other country on earth. There's a lot of waste within government. Let's go after it. But don't go to war against the working class of this country.
If Congress and the president cannot reach a deal in the coming months, the U.S. could default on its debt.
Cut the military budget. That's a Democrat for you.